The moments that change us, that really change us, almost never happen when things are going smoothly. They happen when the ground shifts beneath our feet, when the taxi ride takes an unexpected turn, when the bottom falls out. When you're sitting in a restaurant in Lower Manhattan on a morning the world will never forget, staring at a yellow flower. Welcome to Magic in the Moment, Mindfulness in Real Time. My name is Clayton Platt, and I'll be your host for this podcast journey. And for many people, practicing mindfulness has very little to do with sitting on a cushion, lighting incense, or even focusing on their breath. Just paying attention to what they're doing at any moment. And doing this intentionally can create that same magic. Our time together is intended to share how mindfulness plays out in everyday life for our guests. And before we begin, here's a word from our sponsor, Meditation for Leadership. We all feel it, the pressure to keep up, to perform, to push through. But lasting success doesn't come from speeding up. It comes from slowing down, leaning in, and creating the space to lead from within. That space is where we shift from autopilot to intention, building mindful habits that strengthen focus and calm. It's where we stay connected to our values and purpose, choosing to respond instead of react. It's where we unlock our potential to positively shape our own lives and empower others to grow and thrive. That's the work of Meditation for Leadership. If you're ready to create the space for sustainable success, visit meditationforleadership.org. Welcome to Magic in the Moment, Mindfulness in Real Time. I'm your host, Clayton Platt, and I want to begin today by asking you a question, not a complicated one, just this. What holds you together when the ground shifts? Not the coping strategies, not the to-do lists or the breathing exercises or the plans that we make to manage uncertainty. I mean something deeper. The thing that's still there when everything else has been stripped away. That question has been quietly running through every conversation I've had on this podcast. And today I want to bring 4 of those conversations into the same room because I think together they offer something more powerful than any one of them does alone, a kind of composite answer, if you will. Not a tidy one, but a true one. We've spoken with athletes and executives, scientists, and coaches, people who've sat in boardrooms in Hong Kong and Paris, and people who've sat in the rubble of their own lives in Buffalo, New York. And across all of it, I keep noticing the same thread. The moments that change us, that really change us, almost never happen when things are going smoothly. They happen when the ground shifts beneath our feet, when the taxi ride takes an unexpected turn, when the bottom falls out. When you're sitting in a restaurant in Lower Manhattan on a morning the world will never forget, staring at a yellow flower. Let's begin. When I spoke with Greg Morley, global HR leader, author of the book Bond, a man who has lived and led in France, Hong Kong, mainland China, he opened with a story about a taxi ride in London. He got in expecting a miserable 35 minutes with a driver whose political views could not have been more different from his own. He could have put his headphones in. He could have retreated into his phone. Instead, he took a breath. And here's what happened next.
So he drove around the block in front of a door, and he said, "That's where I grew up. That's the house I grew up in." And I said, "Wow, you grew up in this lefty neighborhood." I said, "But now it seems quite safe." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "actually, the neighborhood has gotten a lot better. It's safer. It's cleaner." He said, "You wouldn't have walked around these parts when you were my age. You certainly wouldn't have come to dinner here." And I said, "Well, things change, and sometimes it's for the better and sometimes for the worse." So I was really touched that in that moment of difference where we started, we got to a place where he was willing to show me where he'd grown up as a child. And I don't know that we became any closer in our beliefs of things, but we opened our eyes to the difference that each other had and the interest in that. And it started from a moment of great mindfulness, actually, because I did have to stop and think, take a deep breath, and decide to dive into that conversation rather than to avoid it.
The taxi driver showed him where he grew up. A stranger, someone who'd been expressing some pretty strong views just minutes earlier, showed Greg the house where he was a child. And what moves me most about this story isn't the happy ending. It's the moment Greg described before the ending. That pause, that breath, that internal choice. Do I avoid this or do I dive in? Greg told me that this is what his book Bond is really about. Not inclusion as a policy or a program, but as a practice. A moment-to-moment choice to stay curious about people who seem unlike us. And he offered something I've been turning over ever since.
I think we all are familiar with the phrase, don't just stand there, do something. So somebody spills, a glass of grape juice on a white carpet, or a child's about to run out into the traffic, or, we're trying to save somebody from something. I work with, I have a good friend who I met in Hong Kong, and he did a lot of development work in East Africa. And, a lot of the history of development is sort of the imposition of ideas from the West into underdeveloped locations that they work for a moment and then they don't survive. And their mantra was, don't just stand there, do nothing. And what did that mean? And it meant that it was most important to understand what was actually happening before they took action. Because the visceral reaction is you see starving children without water, is drill a well. But maybe that's not what needed to happen to save a village or save a community. And so I try to reflect on that, which is there is sometimes the need to don't just stand there, do something. But there's also times, probably more often, when we need to practice the don't just stand there and take the action of doing nothing for a while and really understanding, really being curious, really asking curious questions. And then, of course, we take action.
Don't just stand there, do nothing. In a culture wired for speed, for quick answers, for satisfaction of immediate action, that is genuinely radical wisdom. And it applies everywhere, in leadership, in parenting, in a taxi cab in London, in our own minds, when the impulse to react rises and we have just barely the awareness to pause. And the pause is where the power is. Kathy Love knows something about life shifting without warning. She was living what looked from the outside like a very wonderful life on the Connecticut shoreline, 3 kids, deeply rooted in their community, involved in everything, proud of it all. And then within 2 weeks of an FBI card appearing on her front door, it was all gone. The house, the savings, the community, the identity she'd built. She and her girls moved to Buffalo, and on one of their first days there, standing at a street corner that felt nothing like home, Kathy did something remarkable.
That was when I remember saying to them, we haven't changed. The people who we are when we lived in Connecticut is exactly the same people who we are today. And it doesn't matter where we live or what cars we drive or anything else that we had, let define us, that we were still the same people. And also when we drove down the street, to remember that the people who we might have once judged or had preconceptions about were likely not true, that those people were just as much the same as we are.
We haven't changed. I want to sit with that for a moment. Because what Kathy did in that moment on that corner in Buffalo with everything stripped away was offer her daughters the most essential truth of mindfulness practice. You are not your circumstances. You are not your address, your car, your title, your net worth. Who you are is something that doesn't move when the ground does. And that's not a small thing to offer a child. That is not a small thing to offer yourself. Kathy has spent years now doing deep work around understanding what got her off track, the patterns of codependency, the noise of other people's expectations, the habits that kept her looking outward for what could only be found within. And what she came to at the center of all of it was something beautifully simple.
Mindfulness is the one piece of it that is it's the constant, it's the number one thing that I bring back. So for me, I don't have to sit on the cushion, but I definitely can use my breath. And I use my breath with the intention of it bringing me back to the present moment, because all of the fear that I might be feeling in that moment comes from either the past and things that have happened that are not happening now, but that I'm recreating in my mind from the past, or things in the future that I'm worried aren't going to go the way I want them to go. And so my biggest healing technique that I use personally and that I share is to be present and to use the breath to get me there.
The most immediate, always available, return to now. All of the fear, she said, comes from the past to the future. Right now, in this moment, we have what we need. The breath is how we remember that. I've been teaching mindfulness for years, and I still find myself moved by how consistently this comes back to breath. And not because breath is magic, but because this moment is where we actually live. The breath is the doorway. Ara Tucker was a first-year law student at NYU when September 11th happened. She was right there, Lower Manhattan, the sound of a door slamming, chaos in the courtyard, her roommate running toward a father covered in soot, and then her own father appeared, and that most human of impulses, let's go eat. They walked to a restaurant called Bar 89, and in the middle of one of the most horrific days in American history, on a table in that restaurant, there was something Ara has never forgotten.
And I remember a bud vase with a yellow flower. And I don't know what we ate. I don't know what we talked about, but I remember that flower. And it's one of the memories that I still have even after, understanding the magnitude of the sheer horror, the sheer fear, the loss, the incalculable tragedy. And yet my brain, continues to bring back that memory for me.
A yellow flower. Not the towers, not the smoke, not the soot. A yellow flower in a bud vase, and lunch with her father, and the tender fact of being together. And I find this story extraordinary for what it tells us about how the mind actually works when we're present. The mind doesn't remember everything. It keeps what mattered. And what mattered that day wasn't only the horror, though the horror was real and enormous. It was that small, vivid, beautiful thing, the anchor of the moment. Ara went on to build a career and a creative life around storytelling, around the idea that our specific details, if we're willing to pay attention to them, can become universal. She also learned through her own therapy and growth something that I think is as important as anything she shared.
And she said, "Now give her a hug." And I was like, She's like, because she doesn't need your advice right now. She just needs you to acknowledge where she is and to give her a hug. And I remember that it's so simple, right? And yet for me, I used to derive a great deal of joy and self-worth of like, I can fix anyone's problem, right? And now, with Hillary, with people at work, people who are friends of mine, I'm constantly toggling and trying to think like, and ask, right? I don't always have to mind read, but to say like, what would be helpful to you in this moment? How can I help? That pause of like, instead of rushing in to solve something that might not need solving at the moment, it just might need seeing.
It just might need seeing. Well, I love that. Not solving, not fixing, seeing. A rolling chair moment. I've kept that phrase close since Ara shared it, because I think many of us, myself very much included, arrive at difficult moments ready to fix. We want resolution. We want to make the discomfort go away. And sometimes, often, what's actually needed is just presence. Just the willingness to roll your chair over and say, I see you. I'm here. That is mindfulness in real time. And then there's Spencer Sherman. Spencer is a financial advisor who became a meditation teacher, or perhaps more accurately, a meditation teacher who happens to be a financial advisor. He has spent decades watching what fear does to people in their relationship with money and discovering that it's the same fear that shows up everywhere else in our lives. He told me a story about waiting for a refrigerator delivery. The truck was late, and he noticed something happening inside himself.
I was waiting for it was one last thing. I was waiting for a refrigerator to arrive with the delivery. And of course, they're always late. And I'm saying to myself, this is stressful. I was sort of pointing to the delivery people, this whole thing in my mind. And then I realized, no, this isn't stressful. This is stressful. This body, this being is stressful. The reactivity starts here. It's not out there. But that's powerful. If it starts here, then we can do something about it. And then we can live less reactive, happy, content lives, regardless of the weather.
The reactivity starts here, not out there. That single reframe has stuck with me. Because if the stress response originates inside us, not in the late delivery truck, not in the difficult email, not in the person who cuts us off in traffic, if it resides inside of self, then we have agency. We have choice. We can interrupt the pattern before it runs us. Spencer spent years studying what happens when we don't interrupt it, particularly around money. He watched clients with tens of millions of dollars who couldn't enjoy a dollar of it, couldn't be generous with it, couldn't rest in it, because it was never enough. There was always another level, always one more achievement standing between them and the feeling they were actually looking for. And what he discovered through his financial work and his meditation practice is that the feeling we're actually looking for can't be earned. It can only be declared.
You have enough, you do enough, that you are enough. Why do we give ourselves permission? Because no one gets there by the doing one more thing. By the, oh, this sounds great, what Clayton and Spencer is saying. After this program, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll be there. No, you're training your mind in the opposite direction. It's declaring it right now, right in this moment. And you have permission because no one else is, most of us don't get there, even the billionaires. So if they're not getting there, you can get there. You can get there right in this moment.
No one gets there by doing one more thing. Friends, I have sat with the teachings of Jack Kornfield, of Tara Brach, of Pema Chodron, and Oren J. Sofer, and I've rarely heard the essential invitation of mindfulness stated more simply or more directly than that. The enoughness we're looking for, the stability, the ground under our feet, isn't waiting for us at the next achievement. It's here. It requires not another accomplishment, but a declaration, a choice. This moment, this breath. This is enough. So, what do a London taxi driver, a corner in Buffalo, a yellow flower, and a late refrigerator delivery have in common? Well, they all point to the same thing. Presence isn't a reward for when life calms down. It isn't something we get to practice once the hard stuff is over. Greg found it in 35 minutes with someone whose worldview was entirely different from his own. Kathy found it on the worst day of her life, speaking to her daughters on a street corner in a city that felt alien. Ara found it in a single yellow flower in the middle of collective catastrophe. And Spencer finds it in the gap between a stimulus and a response, in the moment before reactivity takes over and the moment we choose differently. The magic is in the moment. Not the perfect moment, not the convenient one. This one. Right now. Right now, you're listening to this, maybe on a walk, maybe in your car, maybe sitting somewhere quiet. This is it. This is the moment. You don't need to be calmer, more organized, further along, or more enlightened to be present in it. You just need to notice that you're here. And maybe if Spencer's words landed anywhere close to where they landed with me, to let yourself declare, just for right now, that it's enough. If any of these conversations have moved you, I want to invite you to go back and listen to the full episodes with Greg Morley, Kathy Love, Ara Tucker, and Spencer Sherman. Every one of them went deeper than we touched today. Every one of them has something in it that might be exactly what you need right now. And if this is your first time finding magic in the moment, welcome. We have a growing catalog of episodes exploring how mindfulness shows up not on a cushion, not in a meditation retreat, but in boardrooms and taxi cabs and therapy offices and restaurant tables with yellow flowers. You can subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if something in these conversations has landed with you, I would be so grateful if you'd leave a rating or a review. It helps other people find the show. It helps these voices reach further. Until next time, this is Clayton Platt, reminding you to look for those moments of magic in your life where mindfulness plays out in real time. Hey, thanks for listening. I want to give a big shout out to John Gehring of Story Trust Media for his expert editing and wonderful production guidance. I also am deeply grateful for the ongoing support I receive from Meditation for Leadership and their sponsorship. So that's all for now. Until next time, this is Clayton Platt saying, watch for those moments of magic when mindfulness shows up in real time in your life.